Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Curl up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening.
The rise in political violence in the U.S. is becoming less and less abstract. It's personal, deliberate, and being alarmingly normalized. What happened in Minnesota is part of a growing pattern, and it demands a collective reckoning, not partisan spin.
2 lawmakers were shot, 1 murdered, a political hit list. This violence rocked the nation and struck terrifyingly close to home for many. In this episode, we're exploring what happened, what we know about the suspect and motives, how politicians and the public have responded, and why this moment is more than a local tragedy. It's a warning about where political rhetoric and extremism is taking us. We talk fear, leadership, accountability, and whether there's any hope of cooling the temperature in today's political climate.
Political violence isn't new, but it is accelerating. And if we can't come together to condemn it without conditions on both sides of the aisle, we're just as much a part of the problem. Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom. I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
And I'm Mom.
And I'm a little nervous about this one, you guys.
Yeah, I get that. It's a heavy subject.
Yeah, it is.
So background is Representative Melissa Hortman, a Democrat, and her husband were killed in their home early one morning. Previous to that, Senator John Hoffman, also a Democrat, and his wife, Yvette, had been shot while protecting their daughter, but they have both survived. The shooter impersonated a police officer. He had a political hit list. Authorities believe the targets were chosen for their pro-choice views. He encountered multiple lawmakers' homes intent on killing more people. He texted his family and said, "I went to war."
Yeah.
I am just confused. My struggle is trying to understand someone who is fighting for pro-life, but is willing to take multiple lives, that I just can't get those to reconcile.
I mean, it kind of comes down to it to me about how can you say that you value life if you're willing to kill someone because of their beliefs? You're not willing to kill them because you're under attack or because of a specific situation in this moment. You're willing to put them on a hit list with other people, plan it out, and then go to war. I don't know how you can still consider yourself pro-life.
And endanger their family members who aren't responsible for their beliefs. So you, in all honesty, wreck a family in the most violent way that you can. Those just don't work for me.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect in reason there to me.
Yes, completely. I mean, it just, disconnect is the right word. And then his family came out and said, "We don't know where this came from. We're
Utterly
shocked." Yeah. And so how do you get there? How does your brain get there? Is it so focused? And we know it's a fact that you can dehumanize people. And I think that's part of my struggle is, especially with Melissa Hortman, that I haven't heard anything bad about her. I mean, so many people spoke about she was eloquent, she was fair, she was a good legislator.
Reasonable and willing to listen and like
Yes.
everything that you want in a public servant. But let's go
Yes.
take her out. Like, what sense does that make?
It's more,
I think we
I
are
guess,
sorely lacking sense as a
I-
society at this point.
I agree with you there.
Well, I'm not gonna say everybody is, but there are elements that certainly are, and I'm trying to understand where those elements come from.
Generally, as a society, I'm not saying that everyone lacks sense, but I'm saying that generally there's a lot of sense missing. Go try and drive on the highway and you can see it.
Well, that's true. Oh my goodness,
and
that's true.
I also think because with the internet and with social media and with cable news and with mainstream media and all of these different things, information in general is a fire hose Truly, like there is so much information, whether it's right or wrong, good, honest, reasonable, it doesn't matter. There's so much information out there that is being pushed on us. I think that we have become overwhelmed by that in many ways. A lot of us have become overwhelmed by that in many ways. And it's really hard to kind of decide what is true and what is fact. You know, we just recently talked about fact versus truth and the difference of those. But I think that if you're not careful and not diversifying your media diet, you can be radicalized really easily with not a lot of effort on anybody's part.
I think that the amount of information may be a part of the problem, but I think the implementation of that information, the use of that information is a greater issue because there is so much skew from almost all of the sources that we get, and it is almost like it is intentionally used to, I don't even know that I want to say radicalize. I think that's the result, but I think the intent is to pit people against each other, to pit one group against the other, and it comes from all directions all the time, and I think that results in radicalization.
So a quote from the Washington Post editorial board says, "In the bigger picture, the epidemic of political violence will not end until society considers what's fueling the rise in all these threats and attacks, including dehumanizing rhetoric and echo chambers in the fever swamps of social media." I mean,
That's what's the word I'm looking for here? That's almost like maybe a lack of, or maybe too much self-awareness to come from the Washington Post.
I mean, but again, I think that we are really good at treating the symptom and not treating the cause.
Oh
And
yeah,
so,
putting Band-Aids on bullet holes, that's our specialty.
yes, we're really good at that. And we've got to go back to treating the root cause of things. Political violence is really scary. And kind of like Mom was saying a minute ago, how can you be pro-life and kill people? Like there is no coming back from that.
Yeah.
There is no forgiveness. There is no compassion. There is no, I mean, can you learn from your mistakes? Maybe. But for a lot of people, that's too late at that point. If you've killed someone, it's too late.
Well, and I kind of hate to say this out loud, but the truth is, I think of John F. Kennedy being killed, and that's, you know, where the point is to me. But if you really look at it, there's a huge pattern in America these days of political violence.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in Phoenix when Gabby Gifford was killed.
Not killed.
I'm
She
sorry, was
survived.
shot, and other people were killed. But I remember distinctly we were having lunch, and it came on the television, and she was an hour away. So it really brought it home to me. And at that time, we didn't know that she hadn't been killed. I mean, it was just this mass shooting in the middle of a grocery store parking lot.
Well, and I think that we need to also kind of be very, very clear that you're talking about that larger pattern of political violence, but that pattern is taking place across political lines, both ways,
Yes.
towards both parties. This is not one party's really being bad and the other one's being some shining angel of all of this. But Gabby Giffords was a Democrat, is a Democrat, and that was in 2011. Then in 2017, you had Steve Scalise, who's a Republican, who was shot at a baseball practice getting ready for the congressional baseball game. Multiple people were shot. Then you've got the insurrection with January 6th of 2021, where a whole mob of people stormed the Capitol to overturn the 2020 election results. Then that same year, Governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, had a whole kidnapping plot, attempting to kidnap her and blow up a bridge in the process to slow down the police response so that they could go kidnap her from her home, her vacation home.
But then you've got the guy that broke into the Pelosi's home to beat him. I mean, with the intention of beating him with a hammer, whoever was there. And Paul just happened to be the one that was there. I mean, even Trump. We've had 2 assassination attempts on Trump. And here's my thing. There was one senator, Mike Lee, who responded really negatively about these shootings. And I think that's the first step. We can't do this as a Democrat or Republican. If this shooting happens to be a Democrat shooting, the Republicans can't just jump on the board and start going, well, that's because of this or this, and vice versa. This should not be a partisan thing. This is people are murdering or injuring or hurting innocent people. And that's the truth. These are innocent people who, just because they have a different philosophy or a different political idea than you do, that doesn't warrant this kind of violence.
I think more than that, though, Mom. I can't sit here and get behind the concept of calling all of these people innocent people, not because they are or are not innocent, but because you don't get to be the judge and jury.
Okay.
You don't get to say, I think he's a horrible person, I'm going to go end his life.
I agree with both of you to a certain extent. In the United States, it should be innocent until proven guilty. And to prove someone guilty, they have a right to a trial, period.
I think I meant innocent in the case of they have not committed a crime.
Which is also not necessarily true.
Yeah, that's where I'm on board with Callie. We don't know what these people have done in the background outside of the public spotlight. But like Callie is saying, we don't get to be the judge and jury of that without due process.
Right.
And so going in and breaking into someone's home, while I would agree with you, in this instance, they should be considered as being innocent. But I won't go so far as to say they haven't done anything wrong. In the public light, they may be a shining example of what a good representative is, but that doesn't mean that they haven't participated in some shady backroom deals. I don't know.
But
I can't speak to that, but that part is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, I think that you can use Donald Trump as a shining example of this. Back in May, he was found guilty on 34 felony counts of all of these different things. And then after that, the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania took place. And I don't think that it is reasonable to find some correlation. Oh, he was found guilty of those 34 things. Now I can go and kill him. Because he's been found guilty by a trial, by a jury of his peers. You don't get to be the executioner. You don't get to be the judge, jury, or executioner. It's not up to you. And again, to rely on one single person's idea of that, concept of that, execution of that is asinine. Like we cannot, and that has nothing to do with that I love Donald Trump or anything like that. I don't. But at the same time, somebody going out and trying to take his life is unacceptable. Political violence as a whole, violence in many, many cases and many regards is unacceptable. And so I cannot fathom why on either side of the aisle, this should be made acceptable.
Encouraged.
Going back to Representative Lee's words, it was basically, that's what you get. And that, to me, that's just unacceptable to come from a representative. Like, we should be looking for compassion from our representatives, for valuing life from our representatives, not "I told you so." Not "that's what you get, you commie." Because, I mean, just because you have a more liberal lean to your political beliefs, one, doesn't make you a communist. Two, doesn't mean that you deserve to die.
Yep. His specific tweet that he has since deleted said, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way." That is.
And it doesn't even make sense.
I started to say, I don't even understand that. So you're like, this is inflammatory.
Why are we voting for these people?
And you don't make sense. So in reality, it made him look pretty stupid.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Again, why are we voting for these people?
Yes.
You know, I saw something the other day and she said, you keep confusing comfort for freedom and cruelty for strength.
Yeah.
And it just, hit me right in the chest going, oh, yes, exactly. And I think that you can apply it to all kinds of different aspects and things. You want to sit here and talk about transgender bathrooms that don't have anything to do with you. You want to sit here and talk about gay pride and gay rights and equal opportunity for gay people to get married. It doesn't have anything to do with you. If you don't want to get married to the person of the same gender,
Don't.
cool. But just because you're uncomfortable does not make you courageous.
That's really good.
And it just kind of, like I said, it just really kind of hit me right in the chest. And I was like, woof, that is just so incredibly accurate.
Yeah, preventing other people from doing things that you don't agree with is not justice. It is
No.
tyranny.
Yes.
I don't have to agree with the things that you do. I don't have to like them. But
That
I
doesn't
also,
take away your right to do them.
yeah,
I don't know if this is just a mom's perspective, but I just think if you decide that that is your right because you disagree with that person, what stops the next person from attacking you
exactly.
because of yours? And so we end up in this chaos and this mess of individuals deciding who can live and who can die.
Right.
And if that's where we're going to come to, then we're all in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And should be
And
afraid.
that's where I'm going to go back. That's where the innocence comes from, because I may not even know that you feel that ferociously about something that I've said or something that, I've stated. And that's the part of innocence, because I didn't do it to anger you or upset you, but I did it because that's my opinion and I get to have an opinion.
And we can then talk about it.
Yeah.
We can
Yes.
talk about my opinion versus your opinion and how they differ and how they're similar. But
Yes.
Callie, that there's a book series that you've suggested to me that I'm reading right now. And I just got through a part where they're in kind of a town hall meeting, and there is a guy who refers to himself as a patriot.
This is after the government has collapsed.
Yeah, this is after a government collapse, and in a relatively small, kind of large neighborhood-sized community, they're trying to reestablish as a society, sort of. And one of them we would generally consider politically conservative. The other we would consider politically liberal. And the politically conservative guy is saying, hey, we have guns. We have the ability to protect our community. It is not our intent to use these to rule our community. It is, we are here to serve the community as a group. And he kind of gets accused of being a dictator or a tyrant. And he goes and he tries to hand the guy his gun, and he goes, look, I'm not trying to control you. If you want to have a discussion, you want to talk about our differences based on logic and reason, let's do it. I'll give you my gun. You can be armed yourself. I'm not trying to threaten you or use these to carry weight to force you to do things that you don't want to do. I want this to be a democratic process. I want to talk about these things and not use violence unless you're trying to use violence against me. That is my intention here. And I think that's the way we should be approaching things like this. Not saying, oh, you think differently than me, I have to kill you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I think on a bigger picture scale, we have to kind of zoom out of what's going on right now and start taking seriously the rise in which this political violence is taking place, in which it's escalating, again, across the spectrum and across political parties abound. Reuters has come out and said the biggest and most sustained increase in U.S. political violence we're experiencing right now since the 1970s. The United States Capitol Police dealt with 9,474 threats last year, up from just under 4,000 in 2017. To, again, put that into perspective, 2013, the year before the 9,500, was 8,000. So it's just
2023.
continuing. What?
2023, not 2013.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you. 2023. So the year before 2024, it was just under or just over 8,000. And then 2024 was 9,474. What does that look like today? What does that look like at the end of this year?
That's almost double in that period of time.
From 2017 to 2024 is almost triple. Yeah. It's crazy. And so I think that we've got to zoom out again. I think that we've got to stop saying, hey, this is what the right says, or this is what the right believes, so let's go and challenge them. Let's go and put all of this onus on them. That's not productive or helpful. What is the actual root cause of this?
Well, and I think there's a lot of inflammatory wording that's used. I mean, it's just like,
Rhetoric. Yeah.
saying this is what Marxists get. It doesn't have anything to do with Marxism. Or, calling physicians who do abortions murderers. We've got to stop and bring our language back down and
On
not
both
use it
sides.
to
Yeah.
incite. Every single person, I'm not even going to go on both sides. I'm going to say every single person needs to bring their rhetoric down. If you would not say it to your grandmother, don't say it to somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can go all the way there with you. I think if you can't say it respectfully and thoughtfully, then you need to probably rethink how you're saying it. I understand passion. I understand disagreeing with someone passionately. And
Sure.
in some cases, I may not go so far with my grandmother on a passionate debate, just kind of trying to be respectful. But to a colleague, to a peer, I can understand having passion. Allowing that passion to evolve into violence is a completely different thing.
Yeah. I feel like we also have become so desensitized to some of this. What were we talking about the other day, Mom? And maybe it was this, I can't remember, but I have worked through in my brain to stop when we're sitting here joking around and you're annoying me or being a pest or whatever. It's like, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill. That's unacceptable because all of a sudden we begin, like I said, desensitizing our brains that murder is impactful, that it's really, really powerful, that violence becomes justified. And so while we're sitting here screwing around, ribbing each other, okay, fine. But then when you make that a normal habit and it's consistently part of your vocabulary, then when that guy cuts you off or whatever, you have this road rage incident, you're in a different headspace and a different mindset that makes that all tolerable, acceptable.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
It is. And here's what I want to see. I want to see it from the top down. I want to see our president speak kindly. I want to see our representatives and senators speak kindly. I want them to stop attacking the other side. And I don't know if that's even possible with where we are politically here, but that's what I want. And I want there to be a level of respect brought back in.
I think that's more important, the level of respect. To me, compassion and respect, because I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to attack an idea, to say, hey, this idea that you have, I think is wrong, and here's why. Not because you're ugly, not because you're fat, not because you're a woman, not because you're a liberal, not because you're a Republican, but here's fundamentally through logic and reason why I think your idea is incorrect.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay to attack an idea. I think attacking the person is weak. I think it is I think it's a cop out.
Yeah.
I think it's a cop out.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, so we've talked about Tangle News being a nonpartisan news source that's given, hey, here's the right's take, here's the left's take, here's our opinion on it. But there was one in the article or the post that they put out about these killings and assassination attempts in Minnesota from Michelle Goodwin of In the News. It says, it isn't only the president's disparaging remarks or rhetoric on Truth Social, where he's referred to California's governor as Gavin Newscum. It's also the weaponization of the Capitol rioters, all of whom he pardoned, white supremacists, and now the National Guard to carry out political agendas. In an atmosphere that encourages political retribution and violence, seeks to silence disagreement and opposition at levels that reach the highest ranks in government, we should all be concerned.
Yes, I agree.
So let's chat about kind of the role of media and social platforms in this. We did briefly talk about amplifying those extremes and radicalizing people, but what do you guys think about echo chambers and algorithms and targeted disinformation and all of these? Do they drive
I think
or
they're
merely
running
reflect
rampant.
our polarization?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I'm trying to think of the best kind of analogy to give here, because I think it is both. This is going to be really nerdy, but hang with me on this one. So do you remember in Star Wars episode 4 or 5, the first time the Death Star fires? Okay. So what it is it's a big ass laser that blows up a planet.
Okay.
But the way that it becomes a big ass laser is it is a bunch of little lasers fired into mirrors that then
Oh,
get
I do remember
focused
that.
into
Yeah.
one big ass laser that goes and hits and blows up Alderaan.
Okay.
Same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is it's a bunch of little lasers that are being refracted into a big laser that is becoming a real serious threat.
Actually, that was a really good analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see it and
Sometimes you
visualize
just
it.
got to stick with me.
Yeah, I'm not a Star Wars person, but as soon as you started putting that together, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember that happening. I couldn't have told you what movie it was, nothing, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But I also think that we have to be really careful. We talked about this the other day about, again, diversifying your news diet. We cannot be sitting here reading this source because that's who we like. We have to be reading multiple sources and getting our information from multiple sources, because once you start sitting in that echo chamber and staying there and getting comfortable in that echo chamber, you're missing a lot. Whether you like it or not, you're missing a lot.
Well, I think you have to even take it a step further. I think you need to read sources that you like and trust and reflect on those and say, okay, why do they feel this way and why do I agree with them? And I also think you need to read contrarian sources and do the same thing to say, okay, why do they think this way? Why do I disagree with it? And where are they coming from so that I can understand the idea, so that if I do disagree with it, I can go and try and battle that with my words, with my ideas to say, okay, I think I see where you're coming from. Help me confirm that this is why you believe or think this way, and then allow me to approach it with logic and reason to try and show my perspective. And maybe we could come to somewhere in the middle, some sort of compromise to say, okay, we were both a little out of line here. Now we're more in line with each other. And even though we can walk away from this conversation still disagreeing on a foundational level, we can come to a point to say, okay, at least we understand why the other feels that way. And we can approach each other in those situations with some level of compassion. You can't just have this thought process of you think differently than me, you must be wrong, you have to be my enemy.
I started to say, I think that is so valid, the conversation, because, I recently visited with an old friend who's actually been watching our podcast, and she said, I never would have thought that you think the way that you do. And we've known each other for 50 years. So, we grew up together, and I've gone back to that conversation multiple times. And part of what she said is, I don't like to talk politics. That's been my number one thing because it's so emotional and people get into it. And I thought, yeah, but if if you're not willing to have the conversation, then you don't really know where I stand. And I don't really know where you stand. So if you're not willing to go into that conversation with some level of, let me figure out who you are, and a decision to not just be angry, then we can have a conversation. And like you say, Cole, we can come back and maybe we still disagree. But at least I'm finding it really hard to understand that there will never be anything that I can agree with you on,
Yeah. Because in most cases, you could always find at least one thing to come from the same perspective on.
Yeah.
And then you can work from there.
Yeah. I think you would have to work really, really hard to not be able to find something that you agree on.
Yes.
Cookies are delicious. I hate cookies. Like, what the heck, dude? But I think the other kind of facet of this is not even people who aren't diversifying their news diet, but people who are burying their heads in the sand. And
I did talk to someone this week who knew nothing about the Minnesota shootings. And I have to say, I was completely and totally shocked that anyone in America could not know about those shootings. Not a word.
Because I think that in and of itself is its own kind of, and I hate to say this because I know who you're talking about, but I think that in its own kind of way is apathy. And I believe that because let's go back to Cole's Star Wars example. All of those little lasers that are making a big laser, It's happening whether you're choosing to pay attention to it or not. And the big laser is forming. Even if the big laser isn't forming, there's still a whole bunch of little lasers that you have to look out for. And so to bury your head in the sand is just a really dangerous position to take. And that worries me. I don't like that it's happening. And I 100% understand taking a break from the news for your own mental health and just because it's overwhelming and it's so much. And it's crazy right now. More so than ever before in history, I feel like, in many, many ways and regards. And again, I stand by that there is so much information. It is completely and utterly overwhelming. I get all of that. But the fire hose doesn't stop the flood from coming. Ignoring the fire hose doesn't stop the flood from coming.
I
So
think that's fair.
I think that we have to be stewards of information and reasonable voices in the lives of the people around us. If you care about somebody, have a conversation with them. Disagree with them. Agree with them. Talk to them. Because I think that the moment that you start burying your head in the sand, there's no hope for you surviving the big laser or the little ones.
I don't know if I would go all the way there with you. I think there is a level of self-preservation that comes with burying your head in the sand to an extent, to a degree.
I think that it is the illusion of self-preservation.
Yeah.
When the water is flooding, you can't just pretend it's not happening.
I mean, here's the deal. When the water's flooding and your head is buried in the sand, you're the first one who's going to go glug, 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 glug.
In this specific analogy, yes, but I don't know that what we're talking about is a perfect one-to-one analogy. So while I do understand what you're saying, and to an extent, I would agree with you, I think that not paying attention to the news for every story that comes out isn't going to be your demise.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But not having any concept of something as major as this Minnesota violence going on, not having any idea that it's even, you don't have to know all the details. You don't have to be up to speed on who it was. Fine. But to not know it even happened, that's not.
The part that worries me about that is, what else do you not know? What else have you missed?
And I think
And
that's
if
a
you're going to
reasonable
have an
concern.
opinion, if you're going to have an opinion and you're going to have a strong opinion, but you don't know a quarter of major events or where they came from or anything about them, can you have a valid opinion?
Well,
I
you
mean,
can
Cole
still
said
have an
it.
opinion.
Cole said it
You can
in the,
still
But I
approach
said
things with
valid.
reason. Again, you can still have an opinion, and there is potential that your opinion could be valid. It may not be an informed opinion, but you could still approach that topic, even if it's the first time that you have had that conversation or learned about that topic. You can still approach that topic with logic, reason, and compassion.
Okay.
to quote Cole from the last episode, you cannot have an informed opinion without being informed.
Valid. That is true. I would agree with
Good,
myself.
you said it.
I like it when you use his words against him.
No, it's not against him. It's not against him at
Yeah.
all. It's just a valid opinion. It's kind of like that whole argument we had the other day, truth versus fact.
Yeah.
You know, a valid opinion is one thing. You can feel a certain way, but that doesn't make it an informed opinion.
That I would agree with. But you can still, even in an uninformed state, have an opinion that is valid and one that I may agree with.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some semantics to that.
Sure, but that's fair. And I'm not saying that works in every single situation.
Okay. I want to kind of switch us a little bit and talk about how you feel about the contagion effect, because I don't think I realized this, but when the reporting happens of any kind of event like this, Columbine, Minnesota shootings, then there is a significant rise in kind of copycat type events that occur. I mean, significantly. And so one of the things that has been suggested is that news agencies don't use
There's a
The
growing
perpetrator's name.
perpetrator. That's what all I could get was shooter. The perpetrator's name, maybe not even details of who they are. beyond their name in order to combat that contagion effect.
And I think that's a reasonable practice, because with the state of mental health in our nation, I think that even bringing up someone to infamy, there are people who want to be the bad guy. I don't understand that concept personally, but there are people who want to be the bad guy. And so they see this is a bad guy. Let me replicate his actions.
Or make history.
Yeah.
Or make history. That's the one that really, and here's the deal. We all can name people. We all can name Oswald. We all can name Sirhan Sirhan. We know who murdered that, in that case, a Kennedy. I mean, so those names do go down. So it's a factor there. And so I think for me, I'm also questioning on the other side, but I kind of want to know why. And there are times that you can't. The guy that shot in Las Vegas, they've never really come up with a good motive of that, why he chose to do that. And that was a big, massive shooting. And so I don't know where the line is of we need to have something that kind of gives us enough information to be informed versus knowing all the nitty gritty details and that
presenting an
triggering someone
opportunity to
else.
deify or idolize the person who has perpetrated this.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, but even look at Mangione. After the shooting of the UHC, there were people who said, "Well, he's so good looking that
he can't be doing something wrong.
Yeah,
he did it for the good of everybody. This was a good thing."
And so, I mean, it's a little bit of a twist that
that's emotional skew. Good-looking people can still do bad things. Who was the serial killer, Ted Bundy?
Dahmer.
No. I think it was Ted Bundy who was incredibly charismatic and a good-looking guy. And so how many times was he questioned by the police in various other situations that they're like, oh, no, he's a good guy. He looks like a good guy. He must be a good guy.
I mean, isn't that where pathologic comes from?
So I think that a couple of things are true. Number one, I brought this up and put this in here because I remember during the Boston Marathon bombings, how reporting was done. I remember that happening in real time. I remember the media not coming out talking about all of these people. There was a manhunt for these guys who had done this, who had committed this crime. And it was a big deal. And the media was almost silent. We are looking for people. We're looking for them in this area. Not we're looking for this kind of person, not this colored hair, not this colored skin, not this person, not specifically who we're looking for. We're looking. And it was a multi-day manhunt for these guys. But also, I want to go back a little bit further. If you do any kind of reading and research and looking into what happened to Muslims, whether they're Muslim Americans or not, after September 11th, that was crazy. Well, you must be a bad guy because you're Muslim.
Yeah.
There's no logic in there. And so we can't sit here and say, oh, we're going to go ahead and stereotype or generalize every Muslim is bad. That's outrageous.
Well, and here's my problem with that. Can you really identify an individual as being Muslim just from looking at them?
So what if you can? What purpose does that serve?
I mean, but what I'm saying is, what if you think wrong? What if you decide, well, they have dark skin, so they must be Muslim, but maybe they just got a great tan this summer, or maybe they're Hispanic. How do you just decide?
Yeah.
I mean, if you decide you're going to start annihilating Jews, do you just shoot everyone who has dark curly hair? You're going to mess up. You can't judge based on that.
Right.
You can't judge from afar on that. That's my point.
Yeah. And so I remember, like I said, during the Boston Marathon bombings, shortly thereafter I want to say it was Time magazine, came out with the cover and it had the mugshot of one of the guys. Was it Rolling Stone? That put the guy's mugshot on there, but it was all pixelated. So you couldn't see who it was. So it wasn't, hey, here's a picture of who did this, and this is his name, and this is everything that we know about him, because we didn't want to cause any additional fame or celebrity for this person. We don't want to idolize them in any capacity.
Maybe that one wasn't Rolling Stone. That one could have been Time. I thought you were referring to the glamorized cover of the Tsarnaev brothers after the Boston Marathon bombings.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it was Time magazine, where it was literally a greatly pixelated, it wasn't even close. You could not even kind of tell who it was, if it was a man or a woman. There was no telling, because it was, we are not doing this. And then
we don't want to glorify this person.
Correct.
Infamy is too much for them.
Right. You know, there was
and here's the other thing. You take away from the victims. If you're focused on the person who did this, you're taking away from the victims.
Yeah.
And they deserve more than that.
Yeah. And Mom, I'm going to kind of throw you under the bus here. We're all guilty of it. But just during this podcast, you've mentioned Luigi Mangione, but you just call Brian Thompson the United Healthcare CEO. And I love you. And we're all guilty of it.
Because I didn't remember his name.
Because you didn't remember his name. And that's why I think that this whole kind of concept of not naming these shooters is so powerful. And we're glorifying, even unintentionally, we are glorifying these people who are perpetrating these heinous acts.
I'm pretty sure there's a tread mark right across my back now.
Sorry. There was a campaign called the No Notoriety Campaign that was founded by the 2012 Aurora theater shooting in Colorado, when the guy went in and shot up the movie theater in Colorado. So the parents of one of the victims founded this no notoriety campaign that encouraged media to avoid using names or photos of killers, and especially like mass killers and mass shootings and things like this, unless it was absolutely. There are lots of outlets, including the Associated Press and CNN, who have adopted partial or full policies of limiting the names and the images, especially in the immediate aftermath of any kind of attack. We talked about Tangle News earlier. Tangle News regularly withholds suspects' names in mass casualty or high-profile crimes to avoid creating any opportunity for this to spread, for the contagion effect. Mm-hmm. Hey, that was cool what he did. I'm going to do the same thing. Look how much notoriety he's getting. I'm going to do the same thing. I could get that too. And I think that it's really, really scary. In 2015, the FBI specifically warned about the risk of copycat crimes tied to media saturation. There is so much out there. There is so many different skews and perspectives and angles that, especially if you happen to be living in some of these echo chambers in with your head buried under the sand, that you only get this one piece. What is the purpose of putting someone's name out there and their story and plan out there? We don't need it. We don't need to know what their name is to know how awful this was. And so I think, like you said, Mom, I think that it absolutely shifts the focus from the victims themselves, who didn't deserve this in the first place. It takes all of the focus away from solutions and from the root cause to focus on idealizing this person who has just perpetrated this attack.
I can see where we need some information. I mean, because if you need to identify patterns, I can see where you might want to know something along that line.
Sure, but you can do that without posting their name. You can do that without posting a picture of them.
I have kind of a weird question for you.
Okay.
Do you and I need to see those patterns?
That's an interesting question.
I think it kind of depends on the situation. If it's happening in your neighborhood, yeah, maybe.
Really? Do you think that the people of Minnesota who lived in this little neighborhood thereabouts where this guy had a hit list and was going on, do you think it served them to know that it's this kind of man who did this, and it's a white man who did this? Or does it just create an additional fear of tall white men who served in government?
If you happen to be that legislator, does it put you on alert? And there's a huge element of fear that comes with that. So I don't know how to weigh that. But if if you have someone who's going and shooting all the Democrats in town, should you know that so that you can take evasive action?
But that's kind of my point. If they're shooting all of the Democrats in town, then let's say that, hey, all the Democrats in town are being shot. But we don't need to go through and say, hey, all the Democrats in town are being shot by a tall white man, a tall redhead. And so I absolutely think that if you happen to fall within that pattern, that it makes a lot of sense. If there is a skew of your population in the area that you're in, absolutely. If you are a governor or a lawmaker in Minnesota when this is going on, absolutely. But does everybody need to know that? Does everybody need to know that there's something? And I'm not sitting here pushing for ignorance. But
well, Cole is going to say this is because we're nosy, that we want to know these kinds of things.
Not even where my head was at. You are, but not where my head was at on this. So here's the thing. I think there's a way to identify certain patterns without glorifying or bringing a specific individual or image to infamy or notoriety.
Right.
Hey, all of the Democrats are getting shot. We believe they're using this kind of car. They're using this kind of pattern, this time of day. They're doing it from this kind of distance.
They're pretending to be a police officer.
Yeah, this is their MO. So you should look out for these things and recognize them.
Absolutely.
But I don't think you say, and in some cases, maybe to a small community, hey, this is his description. This is what he looks like. This is the name he's using. Just so you can be aware of this individual for
your own safety.
Yeah, for your own safety, just out of
an abundance of caution.
An abundance of caution. Thank you. That's the phrase I was looking for.
Gotcha.
But I also think if this is happening in a relatively small community in Minnesota, that you don't need to plaster that all over the news in New York.
Right. I agree.
Okay. I think those are really different.
I agree.
So let me ask you this. Does knowing the identity help you understand the motive any? Or does it make a difference?
I think that you can, eventually at a certain point with enough evidence, I think you can locate and talk about that motive without explicitly identifying the person. I think in some cases, yeah, maybe it provides a little bit more context, but I think that there should be a general understanding that, hey, this is bad. I don't care what your politics are. This is bad. So we're not going to glorify this person. We're not going to spread his name around. He's not going to make it into the history books, at least not by name, because he doesn't deserve that.
I agree. I also think that there is an element of legal morality, if you will. That's not the right word, the right term. But if we're going to sit here and say, let's go back to Luigi Mangione, because again, I'm doing it too, Mom. But let's go back to him. So he was captured alive. We had a general idea of who he was. He was captured alive, and now he has to go on trial. What happens if you get called for his jury? We're not in Pennsylvania, New York, or on a federal jury, so it's not a big deal. But what happens if you're called for jury duty on that case? The skew that the media has already created in your head, that has already been put there from all of these things. Well, he's a good looking guy and he did this and he wasn't a patient and he was all of these things. Can you be a reasonable, ethical jury member? Impartial. Thank you. An impartial.
I certainly think it makes it harder.
Member?
I think it's possible. It makes a lot harder. Some people can, but I think it makes it a lot harder for others.
Yeah. We were talking the other day. I can't remember who. Ryan and I were talking. It may have been even about Diddy. I can't remember who it was, but if you got called to sit on this jury, could you do it? Oh, no. It was the book that I just read, the James Patterson, Bill Clinton book that I just read about the first gentleman who's been accused of murder and is on trial for murder. If you got called up on a Donald Trump case or a Melania Trump case, could you reasonably say that you could be a good juror? Are you biased? Could you set that bias aside and say, oh, I don't like them?
Well, those attorneys are looking for bias.
Yeah, and
to seat that jury. It's just depending on which bias they're actually looking for, from which side. But no, I don't. I think that makes it a whole lot harder.
Yeah. And I think that there are ways in which we could say, I've sat on a jury before. The person happened to be sitting there in the room. Okay, fine. I didn't know them. I didn't know anything about them. But if you happen to be in a predicament where you are called for a jury of a very highly publicized case, I think that makes it that much more fair for you to not have all of this information, true or false, about that person, and to look at the facts of the case. Again, that puts the onus on the crime itself that is being accused and on both of those attorneys, for and against, to say, this is what happened. Here's all of the evidence. You make the call.
Because it's just almost impossible to leave what you've heard out of all of that.
Yeah, it is.
Or what you've seen.
I think you have to have a level of cognizance to say, hey, I understand that I have bias. I understand that this is what I have heard coming from the news. This is basically hearsay.
Yeah.
I have to discount all of that in order to be a fair and honest juror in this case, because everyone, to a point, deserves a level of compassion. And our original legal system was designed and is stated as innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
And if I think, oh, this guy is a liberal, I don't care, I'm just going to send him to jail, I shouldn't be on that jury. I don't think anybody who thinks that way should be on any jury, because you're not thinking rationally, logically, or compassionately.
I agree.
And yet, the prosecutor might want you on that jury.
Absolutely. And that is wrong.
Skewed.
But it's also their job.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sort of.
And at the same time, you guys, if I was accused of a crime that I didn't commit, I would want them to do their jobs. I would want them to come out and say, hey, these are the facts of the case. This is what is true about it. And I would hope like hell that the jury could see the truth and my innocence and all of that. But I think that starts with us individually. I don't think that would I love to see it start from the top and trickle down from our president all the way down to those of us who are just down here at the bottom? Sure. But I also think that there are other ways in which that can happen. And I think being reasonable, I think being open-minded, I think having conversation, I think respectful disagreement are all different traits that each of us can practice every day while the president's still figuring it out.
Yeah. And the next time you go to vote, think about that and say, is this person I'm voting for going to act like this?
We talked in another podcast about being that voice, that first voice to step up and say, this is wrong. And so I think that we do have to be that way. I think it has to start with us, and that we also have to hold those people accountable and say, wait a minute, man, this isn't red or blue. These are people, and I expect you to behave appropriately with some compassion and with some empathy here. And if you're not, then we're going to rally against that. Yeah. And it may start as one voice, but I think it will gather momentum. I hope it could gather some momentum.
Me too. But again, I think that can start with us, each of us individually putting that out. What is it? I mean, if I tell one person and that one person tells two people and those two people each tell one person, it compounds so quickly. And so I think that we have to start doing that ourselves. I think that we have to hold each other accountable. I think that we have to be reasonable in our stances and in the way that we speak about things in order for that to start.
And I think you have to have compassion. And so I don't want to be Karen. I don't want to do that. That's not my intention whatsoever. But if we've got people who are failing to be compassionate, failing to be empathetic, then I think we owe it to society to say, I need you to stop.
This isn't a good fit for you.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
So, okay. Y'all got a weird thought for me?
Yes, I do have a weird thought for you. So we're sitting here talking about political violence specifically, and I wanted to address kind of some of the security pitfalls, if you will, and get y'all's takes on them. I'm really, really curious what happens to our democracy if public service becomes life-threatening. Becoming a public servant becomes life-threatening. We're talking about the rise in political violence. If this becomes the norm,
Then
do
who's
you
going to
run
want to
for
serve?
office? Who's going to want
Well,
to
I think
serve?
that pushes tyrants to run for office, tyrants who are willing to use force to implement their ideologies. And so I think that generally speaking, you would then only have strong men in those positions, which would be detrimental. However, there's another question here that I want to touch on is, can elected officials remain accessible without risking safety? And in the long run, no, because there's always going to be crazy people out there. But
Yep.
generally speaking, I think if you're doing your job well and you're representing the people that you're supposed to be representing, will there always be someone that you can't make happy? Sure. But if you're doing the best you can and trying to be transparent and operating with a level of compassion, I think that reduces the risk of a situation like that drastically. You can't.
That just described Melissa Hortman.
There's a little bit more semantic and nuance to this, though, because we're in a state right now where it has escalated to that point. I think if you were to reset the board, metaphorically speaking, and develop a relationship with your constituency, and I'm not familiar with Melissa Hortman, and sure, there are people saying great things about her, but if you went and interviewed everyone that she was representing, do they all feel the same way? Do a majority of them feel the same way? Or
I
is
would
it
say
just the people
majority
that are
of them
being
did.
interviewed? I don't think that you can fairly make that assessment.
Well, and I think it goes back to our conversation that we had about the Federalist 51 paper the other day. The purpose of these leadership roles, of these people that we are electing to go and be representative of us, is supposed to be an intimate relationship. So when I go and do something that I know Mecca's going to be upset with, I can go to her. There's that accountability. Again, Mecca, I know that this isn't what you wanted. This is why I voted this way. This is why I did this. This is the bigger picture. Stay with me. So when you have that accountability, when you have that intimate relationship, we can address all of those pitfalls in real time. But it starts with having the relationship. It starts with knowing those people.
But Cole, I just
So-
disagree with you because I don't think it has anything to do with how good of a job they were doing. I mean, if you look at the history of this, it doesn't
think it's
matter
a
what if they're doing.
Compounding of issues. They, generally speaking, our representation has been doing a rather poor job for quite some time. And to an extent, it was kind of designed that way. But I think by and large, it's being exploited by many of the people in those seats. And it is flowing over to the people who are doing a good job. So what I mean by that is not you as an individual should be doing a better job as a representative. I mean, the entire population of representation needs to be doing a better job. And I think by and large, that would reduce situations like this.
The violence in itself.
Yes.
I can say this. If I was a representative, I wouldn't want my address, my home address.
Tough.
I don't do that with people that I work with who I have to report on. I don't put their home address out there. That's too much. So I don't think that they should have their home address published.
Tough.
My home address
Mm-hmm.
is published. Your home address is published right now.
Public.
Right now.
Sure. And I don't like how easy that is for somebody that could just Google and
Tough.
find. I mean, but at the same time, so are you saying to me that we don't have a means that we could black that out on representatives or senators?
I don't think we should.
You don't think we should?
No.
For their
That's its
home?
own level of accountability.
Yes. It's hard enough to hold them accountable right now as it is.
Well, it would have kept, wasn't it Kavanaugh, his wife, kept posting flags that were causing a lot of stink. So I
Don't
don't
act that
think,
way.
well,
You have to be accountable for your actions. And I think that we can sit here and talk about Melissa Hortman being wonderful and great. And you can even talk, like Cole mentioned, does every single one of her constituents feel that way? I don't know. I haven't talked to all of them. But one of the other things that Cole also said is there are always going to be crazy people. So I think that you have to do your very best to live above reproach. I think that you have to be accountable and be accessible and available to people so that you can have disagreement, but I also think that we have to, again, proliferate the narrative of respectful disagreement. We have to treat the cause, not the symptom. And
100%.
having leaders in office from whatever level, whether that is the school board to the president, we have to be holding them to that same standard. You have to be respectful of this office and of your constituents first and foremost.
I do not disagree with you on that, but I don't think that means putting my home address out or giving you my cell phone number.
I do.
And
I think that part of the solution to this problem is what we've talked about several times over the last couple of weeks, is an intimate representation. Instead of representing 500,000 or 50,000 or 5,000, maybe you should represent 500.
yeah.
And I also think, Mom, like, here's my question for you. Right now, today, all 3 of our addresses are listed on the internet. If any one of us decided to run for any public office, again, school board to presidency, what do you do?
It wouldn't be hard to
Okay,
find.
hey, I signed the form to sign up to go and to run for school board. Now my address gets taken offline? Like, logistically, how does that work?
You don't
I
get to be
understand
a
what you're
public
saying.
representative and have anonymity. You just
In
don't.
not the public.
Yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying.
But I think that, again, that goes to show that we as individuals need to be prepared. We need to make sure that we're locking our doors at night. We need to call the police station when a police officer that we're not expecting shows up at our front door and verify, is this what you mean? I mean, that was one of the first things that everybody in Minnesota started pushing out. If they come to your door, call us first. We will be glad to verify their identity. He is not going to be impatient if he knows that you're waiting. He doesn't have any reason to be. That is, again, the accountability. So being prepared, like paying attention and watching for yourself and your neighbors and all of this. If something happens on my street, one of us knows about it every single time. Every single time. So having relationships with the people who are near you, having intimate relationships with all of your people that you have elected into the offices that they hold, being accountable to yourself and your own actions. Oh, shoot, I just said that. That isn't what I meant. I was out of line for saying that. I got frustrated and I made that comment about I'm going to kill you. I was out of line. It was inappropriate. I did not mean that. And again, that immediately brings the situation down, de-escalates the situation, so that when I go and knock on that person's door to ask for a cup of sugar, they're not immediately panicked that I'm there to hurt them. And that all, for me, stems from accountability. And
You have to hold yourself accountable as much as you hold the people around you accountable.
wholly, 100%.
And as a society, I can speak with a great deal of experience. We are sorely lacking personal accountability as a society right now.
Yes. And
I agree with you.
there's a saying, the best time to plant a tree was 25 years ago or today. Plant your accountability seeds today and start growing it right now. Every single one of us. Hold yourself accountable. Hold the people near and dear to you accountable. Because if we all do that, the coverage is everywhere.
And I can tell you also from experience, when you hold yourself accountable, when you own up to your mistakes, people like you better. People have more respect for you. Hey, I messed this up. How do I fix it?
I can trust what they say because they always stick to what they say.
Well, even beyond that, if, hey, what I said was wrong, I'm going to come back and correct myself.
Yep.
Okay. What's our good story? What's our good news?
I need a good news story after this one. All right. Our good news story this week is about a tortuga named Goliath. Goliath
is a turtle, sort of.
Close enough.
Okay.
Goliath is a Galapagos giant tortoise at the Zoo of Miami, who has recently celebrated his 135th birthday. Guinness Book of World Records has recognized him as the oldest first-time father, because it's also been his first Father's Day this year. Pretty wild to think about this, but Goliath has been alive since 1890.
Oh, gosh.
He is older than cars.
Golly.
That's pretty wild. But no, he's celebrating his first Father's Day. Goliath's a little bit of a late bloomer, 135 years old. But congrats to Goliath and the Zoo of Miami for their little hatch of baby tortoises, and to Goliath's 135th birthday.
Yeah, I hope they threw a big celebration. I did just look. Galapagos tortoise normally can live up to 177 years old. So he's still got a life ahead of him.
He might outlive us.
Yeah, goodness. Very cool. Well, congratulations, Goliath. So fun.
All right. It's been an interesting conversation with you two. I
Certainly
don't
has.
agree with everything that you say,
Stay accountable.
Shocker.
but I still love you, and thank you for having the conversation with me.
I love you.
I love you too.
Bye.